Hello friends and happy holidays. At Carnegie Public Library we are going to read a chapter a day for you from this book, An Elk Dropped In. Elk, of course, are those animals that come with Santa's sleigh and land on the roof. That's not elk. It's a moose is what it is. It's a moose. It's not a moose. I know you're thinking it's a reindeer, but this book is called An Elk Dropped In and it has a picture of a moose, so we'll see. This book was written originally by Andreas Steinhofel in Germany. It has pictures by Kerstin Meyer and it's been translated to English by Alissa Jaffa. So I'm going to read the first chapter of An Elk Dropped In and tune in every day for a new chapter. Chapter 1 is called Mr. Moose Lands, and there's a little picture there. Mr. Moose lands. It was just before Christmas when Mr. Moose landed on our house on Finch's Way, the outermost road of our little German town. During Advent, we sing carols to music in the living room. That's why we were there at the time. Kiki was sitting at the piano, Mama was playing the recorder, and I was responsible for the singing. I have a boy soprano voice. The room smelled of orange peel, which Mama had placed on the radiators. The warm glow of candles was mirrored in the windows, and outside soft snowflakes were silently drifting down to earth. I was in a very Christmassy mood. Hark the herald angels sing, I sang. Mama removed the recorder from her lips and merrily warbled the chorus. But it wasn't the angels that came down from heaven. It was Mr. Moose. There was a deafening crash, and the next moment, there he was, plunging through the ceiling. More precisely, first he plunged through the roof, and then through the living room ceiling. The floor shook under our feet. I heard Mama and Kiki scream. In a hail of bricks and roof tiles, a huge brown thing landed on Soren, reducing it to matchwood. Soren was our living room table from IKEA. The Advent wreath and the coconut biscuits on it were crushed to bits. The coconut biscuits didn't matter. Grandma had baked them and sent them by post. As usual, she let them burn. Every year, Mama uses them for decorations until just before Christmas Eve, and then Kiki and I feed all of them to the ducks in the park. And here's a picture of this moose crashing onto the table. When Grandma comes to stay over Christmas, we have to tell her how delicious they were. I don't like telling lies, but after all, the ducks do enjoy them. My God, what is it? Whispered Mama as the dust settled. The huge brown thing lay motionless in the middle of the debris, the splintered remains of Soren and the biscuit crumbs. It had antlers and 4 long legs pointing up to heaven in all directions. It's an elk, said Kiki, a male at that. Showing off again, she had to prove her general knowledge could be relied upon even in times of crisis. It would probably earn her an extra Christmas present. An older sister could make life seem very unfair. The elk's antlers were covered with soft velvet. They felt warm and cold at the same time. Billy Wagner, take your fingers off that creature, ordered Mama. I jerked my hand away. Mama's afraid of fleas and lice. That's why I'm not allowed to have a dog either. How do you know it's a male? She asked Kiki. Female elks don't have antlers, explained my sister. Oh yes, said Mama and nodded. Of course. Of course. Just as well Gertrude Witherspoon didn't hear that. She's our neighbor, since Mama's divorced from Papa, her best friend. Every Thursday she attends the women's group and fights for emancipation. We'll stop here for a minute and we can see the picture of this moose and his antlers. Mama looked up the enormous dark hole in the ceiling, with dust still floating down from its edges. Do elks fly? She said in disbelief. No, said Kiki, nor do they go mountaineering, dive, or play tennis. And they can't talk either. As if he'd been waiting for just that moment, the elk opened his eyes. That's where you're wrong, little girl, he mumbled. I speak 5 languages, and fluently at that. Well, all right, replied Kiki, unfazed. but you do have an American accent. She hates not having the last word. Mama was standing ramrod straight as if she'd just swallowed her recorder. Her mouth opened and then shut again. She simply wasn't used to having talking elks dropping onto her house. "My name is Mr. Moose," the elk introduced himself. His voice was as soft as his antlers. "From the family of the Cervidae." He began to get up and became bigger and bigger. My head barely reached up to his neck, from which a shaggy tassel dangled like a beard. "Cervidae are ruminants that shed their antlers annually," explained Kiki without anyone having asked her. "Of course," said Mama again. "Like reindeer, for example," added Kiki. Mr. Moose cowered and drew his head in. "Are there any of those beasts here?" he snorted loudly. "Of course not," said Mama. "Now perhaps you'd be so kind as to explain how you came to land here." I really admired her. She was even being polite to guests who had reduced her living room to a war zone and had Soren on their conscience. "I swerved," replied Mr. Moose. "Got knocked off course over Ireland." "You flew over by way of Ireland?" "My actual destination was Scandinavia. The accident happened at the turnoff." "It's quite a long way from Ireland." "Centrifugal force," Kiki broke in. "He must have been going at quite a speed." I found it really embarrassing the way she was flaunting her knowledge in front of Mr. Moose. Mama asked her to go and get her camera to photograph Mr. Moose and the spot where he landed so she could file for insurance. "I feel terrible about having fallen on such an attractive woman's roof, madam," said Mr. Moose gallantly. "The boss will of course pay for the damage caused." "The boss?" It was a long time since anyone had given Mama a compliment. Perhaps that's why she ignored the last sentence. "I suppose it's just a hole in the ceiling and one in the roof," she said. Her cheeks had flushed bright red with embarrassment. "Though it's getting a bit cold." Hundreds of snowflakes were spinning down on us through these holes. In the photos Kiki took of us that evening, it looks really pretty. When the film was used up, Mama decided that the holes had to be covered before we were completely snowed over. "I'll help you with the repairs," Mr. Moose offered generously, "but I'm afraid I've sprained my left front leg." Now that was right up Mama's alley. She loves it when someone is ill or hurts themselves. If she had her way, I'd come down with chicken pox or mumps 3 times a year. "You're going to stay in our garage until you're better," Mama ordered Mr. Moose. "The garage has been empty since Papa got the car after the divorce. And later on, I'll make you some cold compresses." I was jealous of Kiki, who was allowed to bring the limping Mr. Moose outside, while I had to climb up to the boring old attic with Mama. We placed boards across the hole in the living room ceiling, and then nailed a thick plastic sheet under the hole in the roof. "Can Mr. Moose stay with us?" I asked. "Well, at least until his ankle is better," said Mama. "After that, we'll see. Papa once said you should never wish for anything bad to happen, but as I was hammering a nail into the plastic, I secretly wished that Mr. Moose's ankle would take a very long time to heal." Here you can see he's looking outside with his flashlight through the hole in the house, and he sees his sister with the moose. That evening, we all went to bed late. Although I was very tired, I couldn't get to sleep. I could hear the plastic awning in the attic flapping softly in the winter wind. Once I was sure that Mama and Kiki were asleep, I took my torch, put on my coat and boots, and plodded through the snow-covered garden to the garage. Mr. Moose was still awake as well. He blinked in the light from my torch. There were 3 kitchen towels wrapped around his left front leg. "I have a question, Mr. Moose," I said. "I'll answer you once you've given me a scratch behind my right ear, little boy," he said. His ears were bigger than my hands. The fur behind them was soft and warm. It smelled a bit like the zoo or a horse's stable. Mr. Moose grunted contentedly. "Where's your daddy?" he asked after a while. "I don't know. Gertrude Witherspoon says he's gone to the devil." "Aha, down south. Do you miss him?" Whenever I thought of Papa, I got a funny sort of cramp in my stomach and felt dizzy. I didn't like to talk about it. So this picture has the moose, and they're standing there talking in the garage. He's got his flashlight or torch. Mr. Moose, I said, who is the boss? The boss, mumbled Mr. Moose. He limped past me to the garage door, and I stared out into the dark winter sky. Didn't I say? The boss is Santa Claus, of course. Santa who? I asked. Santa Claus, repeated Mr. Moose. He turned round to me so that I could look straight into his beautiful brown eyes. At any rate, that's his American name. You call him Father Christmas. And that's the end of the first chapter of An Elk Dropped In. Tomorrow, tune in and you can listen to the second chapter.